What's up, guys? It's Jesse here. Today we're going to start something a little bit new on my channel. It's called Weird Wednesdays. And this is where I basically either talk about conspiracies, unresolved mysteries, just anything in that weird realm. I'll be bringing it onto my channel just to show you guys. And I know, alright, I sound a little nasally. I actually already sound nasally even before my cold, so now it just sounds worse. But you're going to deal with it. Let's just get started. It's Christmas Eve, 1945. George and Jenny Sodder get 9 of their children to bed. They actually have 10 children, but one's in the army, so only 9 children are at home right now. Around 1 a.m., a fire ends up breaking out. Causes mass panic. Some of the children start waking up screaming. I mean, it's essentially hell just breaking out in the house. Flames are everywhere. The stairwell is collapsing. I mean, it's awful. During that night, George and Jenny were only able to save 4 out of the 9 children, which is really, really sad. And they actually did get death certificates for the children as well, even though no remains were ever found. No bones of the children were ever found. Nothing. Firefighters and investigators ended up deeming that the fire started by faulty wiring, and somehow it just caught the house up in flames. And I usually would believe that. However, the events leading up to the fire, and definitely after, I mean, it's crazy what happens, and there's so much confusion. Personally, I just have a hard time accepting it was just a fire. The fire was caused by faulty wiring, but there was a ton of witnesses there. A lot of the neighbors said the lights were still on during the fire, even when the fire was taking place. So that kind of rules itself out, right? George attempts running up the stairwell. However, the stairs are collapsing. He then runs into a shed of his or a garage of some sort and is looking for a ladder that's always there. Of course, the ladder isn't there. George ran to his neighbor's house to call the fire department. However, the phone wasn't working. He was not getting any connection to the operator at all. So he then ran to another neighbor's house, and the same thing happened. Even after George was unable to communicate with the operator, he got into his car, but the car wouldn't start. It wouldn't turn on at all. So that's why one of his neighbors got into their car, and then the neighbor drove off to try to get help. And despite the fire department knowing what was going on, it took them around 6.5 to 7 hours just to get there, just to get to the Sodders' home. What took so long? That boggles my mind. I don't know how that happened. The communication, something was off. Anyways, the next day, a telephone repairman ended up finding out that the wires from the phone lines were cut. They weren't burnt at all. They were just cut by someone. What's even really weird is a day later, people were telling George and Jenny that they actually saw their children in a vehicle. They saw them being taken away by unknown people. George Sodder, he was an Italian immigrant, and he was very politically outspoken. And there was a large Italian population in Fayetteville, West Virginia at the time, where this all took place. Anyways, a lot of the Italian people in Fayetteville, West Virginia, were getting really, really mad at George Sodder. And some would get into fights with him over the leader in Italy, Mussolini. Then, there were 2 different times strangers came to the house, basically telling George that him and his family are in danger. An insurance salesman shows up at his home. He basically tells George that the fuse box that he has outside of his home is going to catch fire and set his entire family on fire. George then expressed that that wouldn't happen because he just had his wiring checked by a technician and all was well. The insurance salesman got so pissed off, apparently. And then before he left, he said to George, "You're gonna pity the remarks you have made about Mussolini." What's going on? A few days later, one of the surviving children came out saying that he noticed someone on the highway watching him and his siblings play together. He said that this man was just sitting in his car watching them for about an hour or so before he just got up and left. Creepy. Just creepy. This is something really strange. Right before Jenny and George put their children to bed, Jenny received a phone call. And on the phone call, it was an unfamiliar voice, and they were actually asking for some random name that Jenny had a hard time even hearing. During the encounter, Jenny just said, "You have the wrong number, just call back another time," and she hung up. And then she went to bed. And as she's going to bed, she remembers laying there for a little bit, and she hears something hit the top of their roof. And as it hits, it hits the top of the roof, and then it rolls down. And she thought it was just something random, apparently, and she was already in that state of half awake, half asleep, so she didn't really think of it. And she went to bed. An hour or so later, the house was on fire. And here's something even crazier. Remember that insurance salesman I was talking about? He was one of the jury members that deemed the fire accidental. What? A later investigation took place, which actually helped a bit. They found a piece of human vertebrae at the scene. However, it was ruled out it wasn't any of the children's vertebrae because it was untouched by the fire. But whose just leaving around their vertebrae? George saw a newspaper clipping of school children in New York City, and he swears that one of the children was actually one of the daughters that perished in the fire. He believed it so much so that he drove all the way to Manhattan, and he went to that school, asking to see the child, to see if it was his daughter. But the school nor the parents were allowing George to see the daughter. This woman that worked at a hotel said that she actually saw 4 out of the 5 missing children with 2 Italian men and 2 Italian women. She said, "I don't remember the exact date. However, the entire party did register at the hotel that they stayed at, in a large room with several beds." The woman said that she tried to talk to the children, but one of the men looked at her in a hostile manner. He then turned around and started talking to the other Italian people, but seemed like he was ranting at them. Immediately, the whole entire party stopped talking to the woman, and she said that she could sense that they were mad at her, and they just kept her out of the business. Later in life, Jenny received mail, and in this envelope, there's a picture of what seems to be like Louis Sodder, one of the children that died in the fire. Now, this photo, he's much older. It does look like him, and on the very back of the photograph, there's writing, and the writing says, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie. I lil boys." Then there's some random coordinates, or just random letters and numbers, A90132 or 35. Yeah. Ugh. I'm just so creeped out that someone would send the family a photo with cryptic messaging on the back of it. I mean, that's just so... That's really messed up. Unless it really is him. But why would you just send the photo and nothing else? Not a note or a letter. Only the photo. I've looked all over online. People have different coordinates here and there, but it's just so random, and there's no evidence to support that this is Louis or that he is in this location. This part really creeped me out. Years later, after all of this happened, the family actually hired their own private investigator. And apparently, the private investigator was getting onto some leads here and there. And then, what do you know? The private investigator actually goes missing. He is now his own missing person case. He's just gone. No one knows what happened to him. A lot of people have theorized that maybe he just took the money that the Sodders gave him and just left. Because, I mean, this is 1945. I guess he could have just gotten away with it and just moved away and stole their money. But I just find that so strange. The youngest and last surviving member of the family is Sylvia. She's currently in her 70s and doesn't believe that her brothers and sisters died in the fire that night. She does believe that a kidnapping took place and stole her siblings away from her and her family. All of the little things before and after, so strange. They just add up, and they just add up to a point where you have to start thinking, was there foul play? Sylvia still goes on to websites to try to find answers and see if anyone can come up with any rational ideas of what may have happened. She's still really into her family mystery. She also stated that some of her first memories ever is of her father bleeding the night of the fire, and of all the cries and the screaming of all the children. That's so sad. So yeah, there's a lot of people that believe the children died in the fire, and there's a lot more people that believe something else happened. The children were kidnapped, but they didn't perish in the fire. I'm not sure what I believe. Anyways, guys, if you like this video, please subscribe, share it with your friends. That would really help me out. I'm going to post more content like this in the future. I'm also going to be doing a lot of different things as well, different genres. If you guys have any questions or comments, just drop down below and post them. But I hope you guys like this video, and I'll see you next time.